All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another RDU Buzz podcast where we go over all things real estate, recreation, and restaurants in the Raleigh and Durham area. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get into it. I do go back, obviously these are not live, but I do go back and look at the comments that are in the comment section, especially like the live chat while this is going on. So if you have questions, make sure to put those in the live chat or drop them in the comments below. And then what I'll do is I'll basically bring those questions over into the next week's podcast, so that way we can answer those questions. So at the very end of this, or some point during this, we'll answer. There were a couple questions last week. We'll answer those in this one. So, but anyway, hope y'all had a good week so far. Got some cool topics tonight. A little bit of mix of local topics and also some real estate specific topics. Specifically, one I'm pretty excited to talk about as far as the age of first-time home buyers in 1991 compared to the age of first-time home buyers today. I think it's actually some pretty fascinating stuff. But we're going to kick it off with probably what I would say is the most exciting story that we'll look at today, at least in my opinion, and that is the proposed Durham to Roxboro rail trail. So this is I meant to talk about this last week, to be honest. And somehow it got left off. So there were a couple meetings last week, early in the week. So even if I would have talked about them on the live, it would have been after they took place. But it was basically a chance for the Durham community to give some input into this proposed trail. But I'm going to share my screen so y'all can kind of follow along with us. But one thing we sometimes critique Durham on is the lack of greenway trails, especially compared to some of its neighboring competitors, so to speak, like a Cary or Raleigh. And also just, the park scene in Durham is not what it is in Cary, Apex, Raleigh, Wake Forest. All those areas have much better park scenes, I think, than Durham does. And so, but to give Durham credit, they are working on improving that through a parks bond that was passed last year. We went over that in one of our lives. Some pretty exciting stuff. And then now you have this Durham to Roxboro rail trail that is in the process of being planned out, and I'm pumped about it. I love it. I think it's a great idea. So this would be a 26-mile trail that connects downtown Durham to Roxboro. If you've never heard of Roxboro, basically when you look on a map and you see Durham, look directly north and you will see Roxboro. It's a small town on the northern side, much closer to the Virginia border. But this would basically follow an inactive rail corridor within Durham County and connect it all the way up into the Roxboro area. And Durham does have the American Tobacco Trail. That's kind of like the crown jewel, so to speak, of the Durham Greenway system. And this would add a substantial amount of mileage to the Durham Greenway Trail system. So, and what I like about it is it includes parts of Durham that kind of get left out, I think, when it comes to either the park scene or the Greenway Trail scene. So most of the American Tobacco Trail starts in downtown and then heads south as it goes into Cary. But this would include the northern part of Durham, which I think, and the eastern part of Durham, which typically get left out when it comes to stuff like that, because they're just less developed areas in general. But let me pull up the trail map here. So right here, you've got it. This is the blue line going up through East Durham and then into North Durham. So this neighborhood right here is Treyburn. So Treyburn is this like kind of almost random neighborhood within the city limits of Durham, even though it's like far removed from the city of Durham. It's kind of like a little island of Durham City up in North Durham, because most of this, once you get up here, is not within the city limits, but Treyburn is. So they ran city utilities pretty far out to to develop this neighborhood. But a trail like this would add quite a bit of value, I think, to the Trayburn neighborhood. Trayburn gets hit by how far out it is, the distance, and it's not just a distance from the standpoint of, it tacks on X amount of minutes to drive from there to wherever you're going. But there's also what I've learned with folks is there's a feeling estimate to distance too, right? Like if you're driving somewhere and it feels far out, even though the actual distance may not be that substantial, but it feels further out, then that plays a role into the valuation of a certain neighborhood, so to speak, or at least the competitiveness of it. Valuation may not be the right word, but at least like the competitiveness of it. And Trayburn feels very far out. So to have a trail access point like this through the neighborhood, if this trail were to come to fruition, would be a really good thing for that neighborhood. It's a beautiful neighborhood. I love the Trayburn area. Michael Jordan actually, I think, was a member of the Trayburn Country Club. I think I've been told his locker is still there. Still got his name on it. But it's a really neat area. It's a really beautiful area, and to have a trail system like this that connects it to downtown Durham or connects it up into Roxboro, would be really, really, really neat. And I think a really good thing for that particular neighborhood. But really like all of this here, I think this is good for Durham. Durham needs more stuff like this. And then you obviously see it cuts to Rougemont, and then it continues on up to Roxboro. But to have a trail that connects downtown Durham to Roxboro is pretty substantial. And even though, Durham, even if they built this, wouldn't have kind of like that interconnected greenway system that you find in like a Cary, for example. Cary's a prime example of that. This would add substantial miles to the point that Durham, I mean, a 26-mile greenway trail is substantial, and the American Tobacco Trail is about 30 miles. Obviously, not all of that is in Durham. Either it goes into Cary and down into Apex. But Durham needs stuff like this. And so I'm excited about it. I hope it does come to fruition. I hope, Durham could use more things like this to entice more people into the Durham area. So let me know your thoughts below. If you're from Durham, if you live in Durham, let me know your thoughts to this. They posted it online, and it got a bunch of hate, but stuff like this always gets a bunch of hate online. So I would love to know your thoughts if you live in Durham. So make sure put those below. Moving on from Durham, we'll go into a development going into the Chatham County area. So Wolfspeed, we've talked a good amount about this, but Wolfspeed's building a semiconductor plant in Siler City in Chatham County. Not too far from Pittsburgh, which is kind of the main part of Chatham County that we talk about outside of like the Chapel Hill addresses that are within Chatham County. But the reason we're covering this again is they are almost done with construction, which is crazy because I literally feel like they just broke ground not that long ago. And they're looking to start production in June of this year, which is just wild. This is going to be a plant that has the capacity to employ around 1,800 workers. And this is one of those things that will, when we talk sometimes about the potential population increase of Chatham County, some of that is obviously tied to the large subdivisions going into Chatham County and folks moving into that area. But some of it's also tied to some of the large employment opportunities that are going within Chatham County, and Wolfspeed is a prime example of that. So, they are planning to start production this June, which is pretty crazy. So I would assume it says in this article here, so far Wolfspeed's hired more than 200 workers at its Siler City facility. I would assume you would see that begin to ramp up prior to starting production in June. So overall, a good thing for the Chatham County area. Chatham County also landed the I forget the name of the company, VinFast. VinFast is a Vietnamese electric car company. I think they're moving a little bit slower in their um, uh, building of their manufacturing facility, but in general, really good thing for Chatham County, and just a good thing for our area in general to have more of these, whatever industry it's in, more of the manufacturing um, uh, uh, elements coming into the area. So, um, Raising Cane's, I would love to know if you've ever been to Raising Cane's. Drop it in the comments below. I've been meaning. I wanted to go to the one that opened on Franklin Street, but I honestly try to avoid Franklin Street as much as possible because it's a pain to park and it's so crowded. But Raising Cane's has obviously had a ton of success on Franklin Street, and they're going to be opening up a new location on Hillsborough Street. So they'll be targeting NC State students with that one. Their main demographic must be college students. So to open up one on Franklin Street and then to open up one on Hillsborough Street, really the only place left would be to open one on 9th Street in Durham, which is a little bit less of a crowded area than Franklin Street. So we'll see if that happens down the road. But everyone that I know who's eaten at Raising Cane's loves it. It's been a huge success, I think, in Franklin Street, and they'll be opening up one on Hillsborough Street. It says open in late 2025. So if you're an NC State student, you will have a Raising Cane's coming to your area very soon. Hopefully they push these out a little further from the college campuses too. But there's obviously a reason that they're doing for that. So speaking of college campuses, UNC is, and we talked briefly about this, but there's actually quite a bit more details that came out recently. But the Dean, I call it the Dean Dome. Some people call it Smith Center. I don't really know what the correct way or what the correct name is, but it's where the Tar Heels play basketball. So it's been around since the 80s, and they're thinking of essentially building a brand new basketball arena because the roof needs to be replaced. And apparently, to replace the roof on the Smith Center is going to cost $80 to $100 million, which is pretty wild, actually. So the plan is to build an entirely new basketball arena somewhere. No one knows where. Most likely, it seems like, according to this article, it would be off-site of UNC campus. And it also seems like the goal of it would be to kind of do something similar to what the Carolina Hurricanes are doing, and that is to build an arena within like a larger mixed-use development. So that way you would have restaurants to maybe grab a bite before the game starts, or a place to grab a beer after the game or before the game. And so it seems like the goal would be not just to build a stadium, but to build something or an arena, but something that like a standalone arena, but something that's also surrounded by other businesses to just make it more of a lively area. I have no idea what would happen to the current Smith Center or Dean Dome, but obviously they would probably at some point tear it down and use that space for something else. I would love for them to build. So looking at the article, it says down here, the Smith Center seats 21,750 people. So just under 22,000. And the new one would likely have fewer seats, but far more premium amenities. I know they probably won't do this, but the Cameron Indoor Stadium, which is where Duke plays, seats, I want to say 9,000, maybe just over 9,000. So it's really small compared to this basketball arena. And before the Dean Dome, you had Carmichael, which is still used, and it's even smaller than Cameron. I think it only sits like 6,000 or something people. I would love to see UNC build a smaller one to kind of have a similar atmosphere as Cameron Indoor. There's just something special about, obviously with more seats, you get more people, more ticket sales. But there's just something special about Cameron Indoor, how intimate it feels, how loud it gets that you just can't replicate in some of these large arenas. And I think, I think it would be cool for Carolina to move towards something that is much smaller and kind of gives that similar feel and vibe as Cameron. Obviously, you can't replicate Cameron Indoor. It was built in like the 20s or the 30s. So, it obviously has a very, you know, a long history that's not something you can replicate with a new building, but you can replicate that environment. And I think it would be good for UNC. I've only been to 2 Duke games at Cameron, and I've been to a handful of I think I've only been to 1 UNC game, but it's a completely different atmosphere. Like Cameron is crazy, it's loud. The UNC games are just not the same. It's quieter. I don't know. It's just not the same. So anyway, all that to say, I think if UNC does build a new campus, or not a new campus, but a new arena for the basketball team, I think they should go the route of a much smaller arena, something like Duke had. But in general, I think it's good. I think it sounds interesting, especially with the mixed use element too. I think it would make it probably just a better fit. But let me know your comments below, especially if you go to UNC, went to UNC, or are a UNC fan. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are about building a new arena for the basketball team. So, all right, I probably spent way too much time comparing the Smith Center and the Cameron Indoor Stadium, but something I'm passionate about. So, all right. So getting into some of the real estate specific topics, I want to share this screen with y'all. All right. So, the median first time homebuyer age in 1991 was 28 years old. In 2024 is 38 years old. So you're talking a 10-year difference between first time home buyers. Which is obviously substantial. And so this article goes over, and I'll show y'all a graph here in a second. But it goes over the possible reasons for this. Obviously, some of it, folks who are, in their mid to upper 30s are, part of my generation, the millennial generation, and they, in general, do big life events a little later in life than previous generations do. My generation gets married later than previous generations, has kids later than previous generations, stays in school longer than previous generations. And so there is an element to the millennial generation that delays big life events until later. So I think that does that is something that's going to have an impact in the average age of the first time home buyer. But I don't think that's everything. I think some of this has to do with, at the end of the day, affordability. When can you afford to buy your first house? And I think there's a big difference between affordability today versus affordability in 1991. And this chart right here, I think, really tells us what we need to know when it comes to affordability. I'll kind of zoom in here. Obviously, right here, you've got 1991 with the age of 28. And then, it skyrockets pretty quick into the 30s, the early 30s. And it really stays in the early 30s from the mid 90s all the way until about 2020, 2021. But if you think about what happened in 2020, 2021, that was when the housing market really took off. If you were to overlay this chart with home price increase, the same area that you see a spike right here is the area you would see a spike in home prices. And so to go from, late 20s into like basically, I mean, 1991 was late 20s, but then really it was early 30s for several decades. And so to go from early 30s to late 30s, I think has less to do with my generation, the millennial generation, delaying big time life events. I think it has less to do with that and more to do with affordability issues, because it wasn't that long ago that the average first time home buyer was also still in their early 30s, like they were in the mid 90s. But the difference today is home prices. I mean, if you bought a house in 2020 compared to 2024, that house is probably doubled in price. And so that like this right here compared to this, I think is solely home prices at the end of the day. I think we're just at a place where the average first time home buyer just can't afford to buy a house until they get later on in their life compared to how it used to be. So this chart right here reflects why I get so excited when, like in the last podcast, we were walking through some of the data from January and looking at the increases in new listings and the increases in overall inventory. That's why I get so excited about that, because we need to see a return to some kind of normal inventory market, because it's not healthy for the median age of a first time home buyer to be almost 40 years old. That's not healthy. We need to get this. It needs to be back down into where it was. Late 20s, early 30s is a much healthier number than nearly 40 years old being able to get your first house. So that's why I get so excited about inventory increasing, because the more we can get inventory up, the more stabilized the market becomes. And I think that's something at the end of the day that we really need to see. And there's some states in the country who are already seeing that. They're already seeing this return to a normal inventory market, where there are inventory levels that are at or above pre-pandemic levels. And so obviously for sellers, it kind of stinks, because your appreciation is much slower paced than it used to be. But at the end of the day, it's a healthier market. This is not, in my opinion, a healthy number. 38 is not the median age you want for a first-time home buyer. You want that much lower, much younger in life. So anyway, I thought this was really fascinating, and just kind of goes to show really the challenges at the end of the day of the current housing market, with high home prices, low inventory, high mortgage rates, just the overall challenge of that. And there's ways, it's not all doom and gloom. The best way, in my opinion, currently to combat this, if you're a first-time home buyer, is new construction. New construction is one of the best ways to get into the real estate market, to own a house at a younger age, because you can get things that you can get incentives that allow you to buy down rates. Some builders offer incentivized rates on specific homes. There's just so many things that new construction offers for the first time home buyer that you can't necessarily find on the resale market. Some of it is just lack of competition, right? Like, you may experience competition on the resale side, but on the new construction side, that competition is it's not totally absent, but it's far more rare than it is on the resale side. And so there are ways to kind of combat some of the lack of affordability that you see, especially on the resale side if you're a first time home buyer. So anyway, that's my advice for some home buyers. Consider new construction, because that is going to be one of the better entry points into home ownership. And also consider, we work with a lot of folks who first time home buyers, and they don't want it. And I do get it, but they don't want to um seriously consider townhomes. Like Cindy and I's first house was a townhome. Like there's no way we could have afforded anything outside of it. Well, she bought it before me, but before we met. So I shouldn't say we, but like even if we had been married at that point, there's no way we would have afforded anything other than a townhome. And it was a great entry point into home ownership. It appreciated. We were allowed to put that equity into a single family home several years down the road. And I think sometimes folks just get really concerned about townhomes, but townhomes are great ways to get into home ownership at a price point that you otherwise may not have been able to get in at. And so for first time home buyers, new construction, being open to townhomes, like all of that's going to open up doors that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily have. So anyway, I thought this was a really fascinating look at first time home buyer and just home ownership in general, and just kind of the lack of affordability that we have going on right now. All right, before I get into the questions from last week, the last thing I want to talk about is the jobs report that came out. I think it came out last Friday, maybe. I can't remember what day it came out, but the reason the jobs report is important is that's one of the things that can kind of move the needle on mortgage rates. If you have a jobs report that comes out and the economy's added much more jobs than expected, you're going to see mortgage rates spike. On the flip side of that, if you have a jobs report that comes out, and it's added significantly fewer jobs than expected, you're going to most likely see mortgage rates pull down some. That's because mortgage rates are following kind of the long-term forecast of the market. Like the 10-year treasury yield is what mortgage rates tend to follow. And those are going to be much more receptive to things that cause folks to either see, okay, the long-term outlook of the economy is really good. In other words, mortgage rates are going to remain high, or the long-term outlook of the economy is very bad, and then mortgage rates are going to fall as a result of that. So anyway, jobs report came out last week. I believe it was Friday. And they added slightly fewer jobs than what was anticipated, but nothing to really move the needle on mortgage rates. So I know I've said on here before, but in order to see a rapid decline in mortgage rates, we would really have to see a rapid deterioration of the economy. And I just don't know if that's something that we're going to see. And so, and I don't know if that's something that we should be wanting to see either. We shouldn't be wanting to see substantial job loss or the economy going through really difficult times. But I think what that means is, at the end of the day, mortgage rates are going to remain on the higher end than people like. And that's just kind of where we're at. Before I hopped on here, this is Tuesday morning when I'm filming this. But before I hopped on here, I looked at the 30-year rate, and it was hovering right above 7, which is where it's been for a pretty long time. So I think that's just something that we're going to see really for the remainder of the year. So I just don't envision us seeing much of a significant difference in rates between now and the end of the year. Maybe mid to high 6s by the end of the year, if I had to guess. But all right, so moving on to some of the questions that we had last week. Christopher Miller said, what is the prediction on the year in terms of where prices may end up. Kind of touched on that a little bit. I think a couple weeks ago with two different outlooks of prices. One was Moody's, where kind of the thought process was there's going to be so much inventory hitting the market that prices were going to decrease a little bit. Not just here, but nationwide, but here specifically as well in the Raleigh area. The other was Zillow's, which was inventory is going to increase enough to slow down price growth, but not enough to prevent price growth. And we're going to see, if I remember off the top of my head, anywhere between 3 to 4% price growth in Raleigh and in Durham. Durham was a little bit higher than Raleigh. If I had to side with one right now today, I would side with the Zillow one. I think we'll see price growth in the area this year. I'm just not convinced we're going to see enough inventory to really prevent that growth in prices in our area. I may have a different opinion a couple months from now as we're kind of watching inventory hitting the market, or inventory, I should say new listings hitting the market, inventory growing. I may have a different opinion, but if I had to pick a side right now, I think we will see prices increase really within that range the Zillow was stating. Some areas will see more. Areas like Cary, Apex, High Springs, where inventory is a big issue. I think could see more price growth than other parts of the area. That's what happened last year, and I don't think there's a reason to think that it will be different this year. The inventory data that we went over last week was really encouraging. I think that goes a long way towards making a more stable market. But in general, to answer your question, I think we'll probably be in that 3 to 4% range that Zillow's looking at. So that's what I would say to that. And the next question we got from the Degenerate Learner was what are underrated areas to buy in right now in the Raleigh area? Looking for my first home that will have great appreciation. That's a good question. I don't have a crystal ball, but if I had to pick areas that I think will see, if I had to pick underrated, because obviously I just named like Cary, Apex, High Springs, those areas are going to have good appreciation because they're areas that are highly in demand. But I wouldn't consider those underrated areas. They're high in demand for a reason, and they will probably remain high in demand for the foreseeable future. If I had to pick underrated areas, I would pick places like probably like a Garner, or places that are pretty close to Raleigh that are going to have like maybe a South Raleigh, that are going to, over the years to come, especially with the new 540 loop down at the bottom, that are really going to benefit from better access and proximity to the rest of the triangle because of the infrastructure that's being laid down there. So I think really anything on that southern side in the next decade or so will see good appreciation. One thing you do have to be kind of cognizant of when you buy in some of those underrated areas, a lot of times underrated areas have, or at least what I would consider underrated areas, have a lot of new construction going on. And if it's tough in areas where your direct especially if you buy in a neighborhood that's building out. And this is just something I've noticed over the years. But if you buy in an area and you're just surrounded by new construction, right? And you're going to be surrounded by new construction for years and years and years to come. And you go to sell that house, your direct competition isn't just the other folks who are trying to sell their home. Your direct competition is the new construction. It's the builders that are offering great rates, offering great incentives. Like that is your direct competition. And so I just tell folks, when you do buy in an area where there's a lot of new construction, like obviously, like your resale ability is not 100% of your decision. It makes no sense to buy a house that has great resale value, but you absolutely hate, right? Or it doesn't feel like home. Like that makes literally no sense whatsoever. But resale does go into the equation when you purchase a house. And so some of those areas that are kind of up and coming have a lot of new construction going in. And so I think if you do buy in those areas, I think it is important to buy kind of with a long-term mindset of, I'm going to be here for a long period of time to gain appreciation, gain equity in the house. And I think that's just better. Like it just doesn't, in the world we're heading into with appreciation, just doesn't make sense to buy a house if your thought process is I'll be here for 2 to 3 years. I just don't think you're going to see the growth in prices to really justify that short of a period of time of ownership. So anyway, that's probably a much longer answer than you want, but I do think that South Raleigh side has a lot of upside to it. Whether it's Fuquay, whether it's South Raleigh, Garner, even dipping down into the Clayton area. And a lot of it depends on budget too. The Pittsburgh area is not cheap, but if you can swing it, I think that's an area that has a lot of upside to it going into the future. So yeah, I think areas like that are would probably be good options. I would just say look at it as a long-term investment, especially in those areas where there's a lot of new construction going on. So but anyway, again, if you have questions, drop them into the chat, drop them into the comments. We'll address them next week. So that's kind of the plan with those. But I do appreciate y'all tuning in. That is all that I have for y'all today. Yeah, thank y'all for tuning in, and we will see y'all next time. All right, bye, y'all.